So, greetings friends and welcome to season 2 of Free Range Thinking. Join us in our cozy recording caves as we dive into some interesting topics and rabbit holes around the topic of neurodiversity with us and sometimes with a guest. So,
Yay.
I'm Alex Carl.
I'm Sharon Lee, and our guest today is Chris Marshall. And so I will let Alex do your intro. But every week, did you already say that? We serve up, I wasn't listening to you. Every week we serve up a delicious buffet of neurodivergent topics, discussions, questions, and explorations around the subject of living as a neurodivergent human. We enjoy talking about and celebrating how people like us can not only thrive in today's world, but prosper, because the world desperately needs neurodivergent humans to bring real transformation and evolution to mankind. And we are the keys through the shitstorm of a one-size-fits-all world, and that is no joke.
That is no joke, yes. And today we have the second fascinating guest in a really short time joining us on season 2. Chris Marshall, a man who is dedicated to understanding the impact of change on our minds and culture. And Chris is a multi-passionate neurodivergent, a researcher, author of Decoding Change, a futurist, behavioral scientist, global macro investment strategist, a ski racer, a master distiller, and a podcaster himself on transitional matters. So there's, I think, a lot to unpack here.
I have a lot of questions.
Yeah, where should we start? I'm tempted to start with the master distiller.
You can start
I'm curious
wherever you want.
Well, okay, that's what he wants to start with. I'll lay out with what I'd like, and then you can choose.
Okay.
So I'm curious about your particular cocktail, the ingredients in your neurodivergent cocktail.
Okay, cool. Well, let's cover both of those, because I think I can tell that story through becoming a master distiller. I'll give it a go. I'll give it a go.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, my background is really behavioral science, and kind of where the professional futures works comes in is around being a global macro investment strategist. So that role requires me to kind of look at the world and go, well, how is it changing? And then the behavioral science stuff really comes in and goes, how does change affect us? How does it change our decision making? And most recently, that's kind of taken me into the depths of uncertainty science. And so I kind of earned the nickname the uncertainty scientist. Where distilling comes in is, kind of what you find with a lot of neurodivergence, we are very creative. And this is not me saying that behavioral science and futures work is not creative, but I needed something else to my bow. This was kind of going back to 2014. And it was probably the worst time in the world to start a distillery, personally, because I was in the middle of doing some academic research. I just formed a new company, or started with a new company doing investment management stuff. I was like, no, I need to do some more creative stuff here. So as a side hustle, as a complete side project, I had no experience in brewing or distilling. I have a love for chemistry. It's not that good a knowledge of chemistry, but it's enough to make some alcohol. I think kind of for me, where my autistic nature kind of comes in, I'm old school. I'm an Aspie. I know that's kind of been put onto the autistic spectrum now, but I'm endlessly curious, and I think that's the thing which is kind of the common thread in my life. That when I find a topic which there's an information gap, i.e. I don't really understand it or know it, but if I've got a massive interest, then this kind of curiosity just takes over. And that was certainly the case with brewing and distilling. And I ended up kind of, okay, I'll tell you the full story. I was in Bruges, and both my kids were very young. They were kind of, I don't know, I'm going to make this up, but 4 and 2, let's say. And as a parent, you rarely get that moment in a restaurant where you're not trying to like herd your children and tell them, oh, just sit here. We want to enjoy the sunshine. We want to do this. They were fast asleep. We walked them around Bruges, we walked their legs off them. That sounds really cruel, but they enjoyed it. And we found this little restaurant, and we sat down, sun was beating down. And it was that moment I was just like, I want a gin and tonic. I want that really long drink, that refreshing summertime drink. And in the UK, there's about 5 days a year where that happens. in Bruges and on the continent, it happens a bit more. This was maybe 2013, and my knowledge of gin was limited. I knew the big names. I knew Gordon's, Tanqueray, Bombay Sapphire. That was probably it. And I knew that my grandmother liked it. I loved whiskey. You know, I've always had a love for kind of whiskey and rums. And they seem to have a lot more respect than gin, certainly back then. And I asked this waitress, the kids were now fast asleep, by the way, in the restaurant. And I asked this waitress, "Oh, do you have any gin?" And her like, eyes lit up, and she was just like, "Do we have gin? We have a gin menu." And I was like, "Oh my word, I don't know where to start with that. Just bring me whatever your favorite is." And so she kind of brought this. I can't even describe it as a tray with a drink on it. It was a slice of oak with this fantastic balloon glass, tonic by the side, perfectly garnished, and she just went into this whole, "Oh, this is inspired by the Mediterranean kind of botanicals. It's very kind of herbaceous and all this." And I was just sat there going, I have never, ever thought of gin like this. Had it, it was stunning. It was like nothing else I'd had. As you can probably imagine, my repertoire, only knowing Gordon's, Tanqueray and Bombay was rather limited. But I then was presented with a kind of a 15, 16-hour drive home back to North Wales. Not after the gin and tonic the next day. Just made that clear. I didn't go for a night out and drive back. And it was kind of in that process. I was like, well, what makes gin? You know, kind of, I don't really understand the spirit. What makes it? What makes it special? What makes gin gin? I knew kind of the legal definitions of rum and whiskey, but I didn't know what gin was. And when I found out that it was kind of this predominant flavor of juniper, I was like, oh my word, something's just gone off my brain, that we have juniper on the side of Snowdon in North Wales. We must have the best gin in the world because we've got some of the best waters. You know, we've got waters from North Wales are exported all around the world. And that's when I found we didn't even have a distillery. And at that point, my neurodivergent brain was like, oh my word, well, 1 + 1 = 2. Therefore, I need to start a distillery. And that was really the process. So hopefully that gives you a flavor of my brain and the story behind that. But yeah, the distillery was just a side hustle. I'm still involved in it. I'm still very much there, still the master distiller there. But now, thankfully, have a really good team under me where I can go in once a week and I get the good job of just going, yeah, it tastes good, or no, tweak it.
Okay, well now, you know, we were saying, oh, we need the book, you know, to kind of skim it and look, because it was a very short time. And I was like, now I'm really bummed because I didn't know about the gin. I don't know how I missed that. And I'm thinking, no, you need to send me a bottle of gin because I must taste it, because that is my thing. I like gin.
We'll see what we can do. Yeah.
What? My eyes just bugged out of my head, and I love the story. But yeah, very, very similar. I'll notice a gap, and I'll be like, well, why not me?
Yeah,
it's never a why me. It's a why not me type of a thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it. So can you describe it?
The gin?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Okay. So there's two main varieties. So it's called Foragers Gin. And the idea being was, again, once I dived down that rabbit hole of curiosity, you come across like, okay, well, why is London so synonymous with gin? As I understand the history, it's that where the M25 is, that big ring road around London, that used to be a ring of bushes, of juniper bushes. And 200 years ago, it was obviously the sign of massive affluence and wealth, to be able to send your seafaring captain around to far-flung places and bring back weird and wonderful botanicals and stick them in some spirit and tell everybody it's the flavors of the world. If you read the back of a gin bottle, most people have no idea what these botanicals look like or taste like. You know, we're talking about grains of paradise and orris root and, you know, all these wonderful things. And I was kind of going, okay, well, I want to link this to what I understand of the world. And, you know, as a professional futurist, I'm keenly interested in how trends and mega trends change the world.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I was noticing was that as we have a rise of digital and virtual, we also have a corresponding rise in us for authentic and real. Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, if 200 years ago, the sign of affluence in a gin is you go around the world to find the best botanicals, surely our modern day version is what grows on our doorstep. It's a very long answer to describe the gin, but I'll get there.
No, it's not. It's perfect.
And again, coming back to kind of the North Wales, we live in this lush green land. It's not only the waters, our mountains are covered in flowers and fruits and, so many different things. And it was just a case of I kind of stood there looking out at this vista going, well, surely the flavors are out there, just nobody's tried them. And so I dived down another rabbit hole and ended up getting a professional botanist in, just going, tell me what's edible, essentially. We ended up with 57 local potential botanicals.
That's awesome.
I was never expecting that kind of list. There was some on there that I was like, oh, maybe I could see that working. Things like bay leaf, we use it in savory cooking. Maybe you could produce a savory gin. Let me tell you, it was awful. It made everything taste like medicine. And so it ended up being, I actually couldn't decide on a single gin to distill, because I was like, well, what's my favorite gin? By this time, my knowledge of gin had gone beyond those 3 brands I told you before. And it was like, well, it depends on the time of day. It depends on the event. It depends on what the weather's like. But I can identify 2 different salts. I can identify a light floral type, and I can identify a big, bold, elegant type. So that basically became Foragers Yellow Label, which is more floral. It's got a hint of sweetness. It's not actually sugared. It's just we use apple and elderberry in the mix. And then we finish with mountain flowers, which we use chamomile and heather, which just kind of line the hills around here. And to stick true to that kind of idea of the modern day wealth is local and authentic, I didn't want to simply just add these on top of a traditional gin recipe. So I don't know. Let's just, for your listeners' sake, let's just pare back what gin is. Gin is legally an overriding flavor of juniper. But then 99% of any gin you ever try will be juniper, cardamom, and coriander, this kind of this trio of flavors. And then distillers will typically add more flavors on top. Now, we have juniper around here, but cardamom and coriander, they're not from North Wales. So I was like, okay, well, let's scrap that. And if we couldn't find it locally, I didn't want to use it. I wanted it to, it wasn't a case that everything had to be freshly foraged, but I just wanted it to be representative of the flavors you could walk past in North Wales. So so Black Label became this amazingly elegant, bold gin, which is just 2 botanicals, very, very rare in the gin world, which is juniper and sea buckthorn. Sea buckthorn gives us this incredible, like, kind of orange peel citrus. And Yellow Label uses that same base, but then adds on top the elderberry, apple, chamomile, and heather. So there you go. There's 2 very different gins, same idea, but just different uses.
Oh, cool.
Sounds beautiful.
I know, and I apologize to all our listeners if you don't care about this subject. I do, very much so. I've got 4 different kinds of really good gin in my house, and actually the bottles are getting very low. They last me a long time. I'm a cheap date, but so this is an excellent podcast for me personally. So everybody's coming along for the ride. I'm going to make a connection here in that, in terms of I'm going to bring together kind of neurodiversity and, neurodivergence and authenticity and change, in that, what you saying, what's the old, what do we have on hand? What is, a part of the land? And the thing is that all of different kinds of thinkers and ways of doing things, it's we're all part of this. And we're all part of the mycelial network. And it's the future of everything as it has been, it's been this industrialized way of structuring, business management, education, you name it. And so there's now, I've seen, I don't know if the needle's actually starting to move the other way or if we're still in this discovery discussion phase. But it is an exciting time where it's this, people are starting to talk about like artisanal. They're not using that word to it, but I was like, oh, why wouldn't we? That's an excellent word to put on that. How do we deal with, systems and change and going back to basics? Because everything I do, it's like I strip it back and go very primal. Because the behavioral science thing, it's like we're all animals, and
Yep.
why wouldn't we? Why wouldn't we? And so to me, what you're doing with the gin is like is perfectly paired with what you're doing, change management, not change management, but the study of humans and human behavior in change. Yeah, it makes complete sense to me. And the flavoring, what do you add? And sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, so that the way I kind of term this, if I take a big step back from what I was doing in the distillery, is that I actually term this period we're moving into is the age of awareness.
Yes.
And I kind of use that because I actually don't think the information technology era, as we term it, is a correct label for us. So this is obviously the era from really the 70s, the invention of the semiconductor. And I think we should use the definition of what we've just lived through as the age of measurement. We've become insanely good at measuring stuff and building databases. We can measure anything now. With the use of technology, we can measure our sleep at night. We can measure the calories we're taking in. Even things like steps. It just is such a simple idea now. Whereas a few decades ago,
but it also comes with judgment.
Yes.
It's like hard to separate those two, and what humans have done with that have taken it kind of to an extreme level.
Yeah.
I think.
And so where I see this kind of going is that very much when you look at the trends underneath, there's what I could talk about is a cultural philosophy change. And you're absolutely right that we've run with a very similar philosophy always since the start of the Industrial Revolution. There was potentially a change in philosophy as we came into 1900. That's the two world wars, where it could have shifted. We were essentially facing a totalitarian dictatorship. It didn't. But now it's shifting because I'm going to give you a tool actually to see the world through, if that's all right. So one of the things I talk a lot about with audiences is I want people to see the world in layers. And what I mean by that is you have layers which update very fast and you have layers which update very slowly. Now, the relationship is that if it updates fast, it doesn't have a massive impact. If it updates slowly, its impact is absolutely massive. And I typically talk about 6 layers. And we start with products. Products update, well, if you have any retail background or just like shopping, you know that products update annually, seasonally, monthly, sometimes even weekly. Underneath that layer, you have the business layer. Businesses update slower than products. That makes intuitive sense. And then below that, you then have infrastructure. When we're talking about disruptive technologies, that's the layer which disruptive technologies originate in. So the semiconductor in the 70s, or James Watt's steam engine in the 1700s, or the locomotive by George Stephenson in the mid 1800s. But once we get below that layer, if change originates in the slower layers, then we're in for what I call radical social change. And those other layers are then regulation. Normally, we see regulation respond to products, business, and infrastructure, but we're now starting to see regulation bring its own change. Below that, you then get culture. If you see a shifting philosophy of culture, oh my word, we could go back through history and pull out the times where culture moved. And then the very bottom one is obviously the natural environment. Updates over millennia, but when it moves, boy, it moves, and it's got its own force and inertia. And that's why I kind of talk about, we're at this moment of pivotal change, of real seismic pivotal change. Not like what we saw over the last 200 years. I actually think this is as big as when we stopped being hunter-gatherers and we became a settled agrarian society. And I think that awareness phase that we're going through, this age of awareness, is kind of, everybody's getting stressed out. And this is the interesting thing about uncertainty, is when uncertainty prevails. So if we talk about change, it's the other side of the same coin as uncertainty. We're essentially saying the ground you think is permanent and solid under your feet is suddenly ripped away. And as humans, that's incredibly unsettling.
For most humans.
Yes.
The predominant slice of,
Yeah, absolutely. And when you go, I mean, it's our biology, it's our evolutionary biology that go back a couple of 100,000 years ago, when we were kind of crawling out of wherever, whatever cave you want to pick. Uncertainty was the thing which kept you alive. You know, you're hyper vigilant. And you notice a certain smell on the air, or you notice grass is moving in a different way than they have done for the last few years. You go, okay, that might be a lion or a bear or whatever. And that kind of hypervigilance, that stress state, that stress response kept us alive. But now the world's flipped, in that we get the same stress response, but it's not often life-threatening situations. It's somebody's email. or it's a filmmaker being really clever with suspense and fear, or it's whatever it might be, that sends our brains into this state of rigidity and outrage, pessimism for the future. All of these things, that they're actually stress responses.
Exactly.
So yeah, we've just come from gin. We've just come from gin to the pivotal moment of human history.
But of course, it makes perfect sense to me. But it's like the I always speak about it in terms of, like if you're on a line of when humans arrived and where we are now, we've been domesticated this long. There's not even space between my fingers. And we'd like to think we're so domesticated. We're barely domesticated, barely. So it's all these things that are going on now, and it's the hyper fear that's being pumped in the media. It keeps everybody at a baseline of super unhealthy, at an unhealthy level, and to feed that, and it literally changes us chemically. I'm going to say us, but most people. There's others of us who, I don't know for what, there's a lot of studies going on that are absolutely fascinating, that it doesn't, for some of us, it's like, it's almost like coming home. And it's not that it necessarily feels good, but it doesn't feel foreign. And it doesn't feel, and watching people kind of, flip out and lose their shit around, and you're like, why so why so worried, why so scared, and it's but then, and also that thing of like, why am I not, what's different about it? And I noticed that a lot of, not all by any stretch of the imagination, but the people who are neurodivergent, or people who are marginalized in other aspects, we deal with levels of different kinds of stress, real, if you will, and like I want to say, death by 1,000 paper cuts. So our muscles of adaptation are stronger to something. So it's like we can discern real threat as opposed to unreal threat. And if it's a real threat, it's kind of like we get busy.
Yeah.
And if it's an unreal threat, we're like, yeah, that's bullshit. And so it's kind of like in this age of awareness, I feel like, not necessarily the canary in the coal mine thing, because that's an alert system, but there's those of us who are saying, hey, everybody, calm down. We're going to be okay. Here's what we need to do. But society hasn't been used to listening to the people who are marginalized. And absolutely. So this is interesting right now. I totally agree with you. We are living in fascinating times. Now, whether the human race can get their shit together enough to, use the, or put to use the high value people in the society, we'll see. There's no guarantee, humans are tend to be, self-sabotaging fairly well. We've got a pretty good history of that. But I like being alive right now. It's absolutely fascinating.
I completely agree with what you're saying there. And this is kind of where, for me, the fascinating part of my work now takes me is that a lot of my work is now focused on helping people become far more able to embrace uncertainty. Because I think that's going to be one of the most fundamental skills in the next 20, 30 years is we're going to...
I agree.
So if we go from like an industrial revolution, let's just peel back the layers again. One of the things we saw, everyone talks about a mechanized process of production. What they don't talk about is a mechanized process of thought and management. Okay, and that's where we've been living. Is we kind of, we can go back further than that. We can go to René Descartes if we want, and kind of go, okay, well, he tried to divorce rational thought and emotions. And if you've kind of followed this,
well, that's working for us now. Yeah,
yeah. But the influence of that kind of thinking has been profound on science, and it's only in the last 10, 15 years, maybe 20 years, that we're starting to go, hold on a minute, emotions are quite important. they might be a good signal here. And that's really where my work now takes me into that kind of zone, is working with people. And I think where neurodivergents are very good is we've had to handle an awful lot of crap from a very young age. We've always been slightly outside. And, kind of what you were saying there about kind of that muscle of dealing with uncertainty and passing about, well, is this something to really worry about or not? I think for a lot of neurodivergents, they're used to that. That's not to say they don't get overwhelmed. I personally have. I've been burnt out properly twice, somewhere I never want to go back to. But we typically are more hypervigilant. We're more aware. We're tuned in actually to some of the patterns. We're not necessarily tuned into other people, which sometimes is our saving grace and sometimes our nemesis. But we're more tuned into what's occurring. And so what I find fascinating now, so I kind of work either with corporations or groups or even one-on-one, just helping leaders, anyone who has to make a big decision that involves kind of a long-term decision, so thinking about the future. They are coming across
infinite and complex.
Yeah, absolutely, because they're faced with this incredibly uncertain future as they look out. And so what I'm doing is just helping people just dial up their ability to deal with uncertainty. And I think for me, this is where it brings it all the way back to my younger days as a kind of a junior athlete. So I was on the British children's ski team. And actually, I had this very serendipitous or fortuitous trip out to the States. And I was on a scholarship out to this place called Killington, which is in the Green Mountains up in Vermont. And I met this sports psychologist. And I can remember, I was actually a really anxious athlete. I didn't know that was my neurodivergency, but I think looking back, it probably was. That in ski racing, you get 2 runs and you add the 2 times together. And in the first run, I would put so much pressure on myself that I would be way out of the medals. And somehow I was good enough in the second run to pull it all back. It wasn't a very effective strategy. Let's put it that way. It'd be far better. I would have much rather just skied well in both runs. But it was meeting this performance psychologist. And then I can remember I was 14 years old and he just went to me, there's a physical game and there's a mental game. And ever since then, I think I've viewed the world in those 2 pillars of going, okay, well, what's the technical thing going on here? And what's the mental thing going on here? And that's where, business is so far behind. Like all they've looked at is the physical game, or in their world, the technical game. They've just gone, well, if you're not completely stressed out and burnt out, you must be all right. And it couldn't be further from the truth. Stress is not an either on or off. It's at the degrees. As you rightly said, low-lying levels of chronic stress can be almost as disruptive and damaging as periods of really high traumatic stress.
Absolutely.
This is where we see so many maladaptive habits, addictive behaviors, obesity. We could just keep going on. And most of the work today is looking at habit layer, going, okay, well, you need to have more willpower to change this habit. But we need to take a further step back and go, well, why did we start the habit in the first place? And normally it's stress. Normally our body is in a stress response. The chemicals are flying around us, and we want to do anything to basically feel good. So we reach for a beer, a glass of wine, a chocolate bar, a takeaway, shopping, or whatever it might be.
Or self-medicating.
And all of a sudden, our joy response is now something we perceive as external.
Right.
And then when uncertainty hits and the world is so disruptive, we do more of it, but it's actually self-destructive. And so yeah, that's kind of, we're at such an important point. And I think the next 20 years or so, as I said, building the skills of uncertainty, and actually even seeing uncertainty not as something threatening, but as unlimited potential is kind of where humanity needs to get to.
Yeah. Have you read the book, happened to read the book by Luke Burgess, Wanting?
No, I've not. I'll put it on my,
it's so good. You would like it.
I'll put it on my reading list.
And it talks about the intrinsic and extrinsic motivators, and about the desire and where it comes from. And it's right what you were speaking about. And so and I when I do my coaching at different people, it always comes back to that. Might start off on something else, but the intrinsic motivation and the extrinsic motivation gets tangled because of the culture, family culture, education culture, you name it. And people stop understanding or stop building the muscle of intrinsic motivation. And so then when it comes to something super important, that's when people tend to feel very lost, because they don't know how to trust themselves. That muscle has atrophied. Exactly what you're speaking about. But the intrinsic and extrinsic motivation is I can't say how important it is. But nobody teaches that. Nobody talks about it. That should be something that well, of course, spoken about in families, but in school systems, education systems, because most people I come across, they can't tell me, I have to soften it, because when you say, what do you really want? And most of the people I ask the question to, they can't tell me. And I'm always just amazed by that. And even people who are super, want to quote, successful, meaning in this era means how much money do you have? But they have a career, they have this, they have all the badges and trappings of what society deems as successful, but they don't take into account, are you happy? What do you want? What does that type of success look like? And because all this success it's extrinsic.
Yep. Yeah, and there's so much of, I think modern society has done that. And for me, I think you trace that back to, I know I keep throwing René Descartes under the bus here. I don't think you'll mind. But when you split rational thought and emotions, or when you at least put emotions are the enemy of rational thought, then this very subtle change happens. And the subtle change is that emotions should be things that you banish, that you suppress.
Right.
And you suddenly then become disconnected. Especially
for men. For men. My God.
Because it's not alpha to express. Alpha is in most people's view is always fine, always at peak, always at optimum, always in command. And then we associate.
So damaging.
Yeah, absolutely. And what neuroscience and biology is showing us is that our emotions are the language our nervous system uses. Our nervous system doesn't use words.
Exactly.
It shouldn't really come as much a surprise.
And the subconscious is all symbol and metaphor.
Yeah.
Everything that we actually run on is so intangible and immeasurable.
Yeah, completely.
Yeah.
And so when you look at the kind of these things, we've distanced ourselves, because we've gone, if I'm going to be a good thinker, if I'm going to be part of high society, then I'm not going to be kind of beholden to my emotions. I'm going to get those out of the way. And we do everything we can to try and do that, which is a focus on the external. And, you know, modern society has certainly helped us do that, going, if you want to be happy, buy this car. If you want to be happy, do this.
Right.
And we've kind of believed them. I mean, I think that's the sad thing. We believed them and it's become so ingrained.
Yeah.
But yeah, emotions are so important, and they're meant to just be signals. You know, come back to that kind of what I was talking about right at the start, where evolutionary years ago, when we came out that cave and we sensed something different, we got an emotion, and that emotion was fear. And it should have just been a signal, a little like kind of red flag going, hey, just a minute, like pay attention. Emotions, negative emotions are meant to last only about 90 seconds. If you speak to most people, they're like, what? I don't just remain stressed or anxious for 90 seconds. I can make that last months or years. But that's our own doing. After that, we just grabbed onto it. We're putting energy behind it and just ruminating. But emotions are super important. And until people tune back into that, you can't help but fall into kind of these dead ends and traps and twists and turns and wonder, how did I end up here? Because you're not paying attention to what's going on.
Yeah. And it's right now there's a lot of people, you know, like Brene Brown and some of these people that are speaking about, you know, emotions. So it's, and of course, once it's not essentially a tipping point or critical mass, but we're heading in that direction. This is what I was speaking about. It's like the pendulum is swinging, not quite sure if we're all the way out on the end and it's ready to come back, but it is moving. The needle is moving, the pendulum is swinging, and it is the age of awareness, exactly like what you were saying. And it's yeah, you could see it now. You could see it moving. You can hear it in different, the people I'm in contact with, very, very international. And so once I hear something in another country and somebody saying something and it's the same as this over here, I'm like, oh, okay, now we're getting connected, and because everybody's speaking about the same thing, and it's not there yet, but it's heading in that direction.
Yeah, completely.
And Western society is kind of a hard sell on some of the stuff with emotions and spirituality. I don't mean in a religious way, but that everything is connected way, because of the Asian cultures. They're very they're so far ahead of us in terms of understanding the connectedness of things.
Completely. And I think that's actually one of the reasons why my work is kind of getting so much recognition at the moment, is because people are ready to hear it. You know, if I'd been doing this 20 years ago, I'd been probably like, I don't know, flogged in the street or something. Hopefully not, but I certainly wouldn't have had much of an audience. And I think people, as you say, people are starting to come around to this.
But they're starved for it, because they can sense that there's something more, or that they need, because what has been working isn't working. And I think we have the pandemic to thank for that. Because everybody, what I call the great pause, and everybody's had to hang out with themselves for a good long time. And when it first came, I thought, I recognize this. I know what this needs to be. I mean, it's horrific on a lot of levels, totally gutted us financially, but at least we have our health and we're alive. And a lot of people haven't made it through. And so it's been very bad, devastating in that respect. But mankind in general, I think we needed it. And I recognize it at one time, you know, going through one lockdown wouldn't have been enough. We would have been able to deny it. So it had to go 2 or 3 times in order for humans, the propensity to throw it off and deny it would have been too strong.
Yeah. But I mean, if you look at the behavior in that first kind of, you know, most places around the world, when the pandemic first hit, it was a very similar story all around the world. Obviously, as a global investment strategist, I'm interested in what's happening all over the world. And one of the things was like governments were all kind of going, oh, well, this is just going to be a 3 weeks. You'll remember the phrase, flatten the curve. 3 weeks and then we'll be unlocked. And their behavior in those first 3 weeks, everybody either rushed out to get beer or toilet roll. Yeah, we had the great toilet roll panic. And build a bar, you know, in the back garden. And these weren't behaviors which were like kind of, I'm just going to use this time to step back. This was like, oh, great, this is a 3-week holiday and I'm going to party.
Right.
And it's only then once you get that extended pause that people were like, okay, well, I've drunk as much as I physically can. I've eaten as many takeaways as I can fit in me. Maybe I should do a bit of a health kick.
Right.
And
yeah,
but we
Peloton took off. Peloton was like outrated. Of course, then they crashed.
The gin consumption in this household took off as well in the first lockdown.
Absolutely. I mean, so to talk about that side, you know, kind of online, obviously, kind of retail sales to hotels and bars was gone. They were all closed. But the online trade, people were like very much like, no, I don't really want to sit and dwell and think. I want to just enjoy. And so we saw kind of retail online sales, you know, kind of fly through the roof as people were going, well, what am I going to do for 3 weeks? Because there's always a study I talk about, which I find so insightful to human nature. And that is that a group of scientists basically were trying to get people to see what they would do if they were confronted with sitting with no distractions, no input for 15 minutes. It's not exactly very long, is it? And in one group, they decided, well, let's just make this ridiculous and let's give them the opportunity to give themselves an electric shock.
I heard about this study.
Something like 60% of people took that option because it was better than actually sitting just with themselves.
Isn't that crazy?
And that's how much, you know, it takes for many humans to actually go within and really consider, okay, well, I'm just going to sit with myself and think about my thinking. And this is where I think neurodivergents actually have something, because, you know, we're quite good at withdrawing.
Well, and introverts as well, because everybody's freaking out. The extroverts for the first time. And Susan Cain's book, Quiet, she was describing that before a certain, I want to say the industrial age, before the age of like marketing, you know, full blown marketing, where then extroversion was valued and introversion was devalued. And so now we're in this, you know, full-on world where everything is valued from an extroversion point of view. And so, you know, so it's kind of like, well, what's the matter with you? And if you don't want to do things in you know, with the, I want to say the framework of extroversion, and it's crazy to think that, and how everything, once you see it, once she describes that in her book, you're like, wow, okay, now I see that. And so it was interesting, having read that book, then to watch everybody during the pandemic, all the extroverts were like freaking out. And you're like, look at that. And I don't want to say I, got humor off of that, but it was fascinating. And I know that people were suffering. So I wasn't getting a kick out of that by any, stretch, but it was a little bit humorous in certain aspects of like, you having a hard time hanging out by yourself, because of as much shit as introverts have taken for so long, that it's like to see and very, very quickly and very starkly the opposite effect.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we're becoming, coming back to this awareness, but we are becoming more aware of these things. We're starting, all of those things are observable because, again, this age of measurement that we've just come through, we're able to actually observe really for the first time. Before this, I mean, even collecting data on how many people lived in your country as a government was almost nigh on impossible. Now we can probably map where they are by the minute. We're using that data. Yes, it can create panic and fear and outrage. Yes, it can create extreme emotions. That's a stress response in my view. But it can also bring an awful lot of good in terms of we suddenly start becoming far more aware of what we're doing and what works and what doesn't work.
Speaking of what does work and what doesn't work, I would be interested in how you are working with people. So, first of all, are you working only with individuals or with teams as well? And what are the tools you are working with?
So yeah, I work with both. I work from a coaching platform rather than a kind of a psychotherapy platform or anything else. But really kind of the framework I developed around this. So when we get into that stress response, and we all have it at some point, there's always something that triggers us, something that overwhelms us. When we're in that, kind of what we're finding is therapy techniques such as cognitive behavioral therapy and things like that, really good when you're not stressed. But when you actually are stressed, the chemicals in your brain, cortisol actually severs the connection between regions in the brain. You don't have access in the same degree to the executive functions. You don't have access to the prefrontal cortex, which kind of is like the moderator of different regions. And so what I'm kind of doing is I start by building awareness. Awareness and radical self-truth are the two first things. The self-truth one actually is really interesting because lots of people will go, of course, I don't lie to myself. And then you start kind of going through things and you go, well, okay, I tell myself quite a lot of white lies here. Procrastination is one, which everybody is familiar with. And when you dig into it, it's actually just, I'd rather do something else. I know I need to do this, but I'm going to go do that. And I'll make a reason why I need to go clean the car instead of sit down and write that paper. So awareness and radical self-truth at the start. And then it's really about teaching people what the stress response is. And I come at this from a biological point of view because I think people find that extraordinarily kind of safe and it's not judgmental. When you start talking about it's your biology creating a stress response, it's your biology creating this outlook of fear or pessimism. It's biology that's making you not empathetic, but disengaged. It's, too often we've come at this going, well, why is my personality so bad? Why can't I kind of hold a social conversation, or why can't I be nice to that person? And actually it's the chemicals in us. It's our nervous system going, you're in a stress response. And so that's kind of the next stage, is kind of then allowing people to be the masters of their stress response. And when you can do that, you start to realize that stress isn't bad. It's just when that stress buzzer is left on, when you don't regulate, when you go all the way to fight, flight, and freeze and don't come back. So that's kind of where it centers around. And to get around this issue of our emotions are more powerful than our cognition, when we are stressed out, is what I kind of try and get people to do is to develop a routine, a physical routine. And that physical routine is what I call the pause, move framework.
What?
Pause, move.
Pause, move. Yeah, right.
So 2 pauses. And the first pause is literally the introspective pause. And the way I do this physically is whenever you feel like kind of you're starting to get overwhelmed, go take a 5-minute walk. And don't take headphones, don't take anybody to talk to, take yourself. And the first pause is all about what's going on inside me. So it's coming back to that kind of, what is the emotion? What's triggered it? Why am I in this stress response? Because until you sort that, you can't actually make a good decision. So we can show through science and research that when we're even in a low stress state, our outlook and relationship and behaviors change. We don't actually have access to everything, and we don't actually know what we want. So to come back to your point, Sharon, before, when you ask people, what do you want? If you're in a stress state, you don't actually know.
Exactly.
You have no idea.
When that's people's baseline, when they're sitting on low level stress, it's like little t trauma, because it's, the death by 1,000 paper cuts. Sometimes for most people, it's a life.
Yeah.
Lifelong. And so how did you get to your baseline? So I do, workshops and coaching about baselines, and to get people to the awareness of where their baseline is, exactly what you're talking.
Absolutely. And I mean, you're talking there about one of the most incredible properties of the body and the brain, and that's plasticity. our baseline changes. So I had a ski coach when I was very young who said, he'd always go, what does practice make? And every kid would go, perfect. And he'd go, no, practice makes permanent. He goes, only perfect practice makes perfect. In the skiing context, he was always saying, oh, well, practice this exercise badly and you become a very good bad skier. And it's the same with our brains. Like if we remain in a certain stress state, guess what happens? Our brain goes, okay, well, this is the default. This is the status quo. This is the set point. And
exactly.
It's more efficient because you're always here for me just to rewire a few things and you can stay there. So what's, one of the things which I see happen is you've got to work with somebody for a number of weeks because it takes a few weeks for the brain to start reorganizing itself. And it doesn't happen overnight. And people have got to know that. And sometimes they just need that buddy system, which is, kind of the way I view a coach is I'm just there just to help people along. That when you kind of slip up, I'm there to kind of go, don't worry, that's normal. This is the path we're on. And so kind of coming back to that pause, move framework, that's what the first pause is it's just that building that inner awareness. And the more you do it, the quicker you can do it. At first, it seems like a big activity. And after a few months, it's almost second nature. The second pause is then thinking about, so this is really relating to business leaders, CEOs, investment managers, but as I said, people who really need to think about the future and make good quality decisions. That second pause is then once you've controlled your stress state, that you've brought yourself back down, you're now optimistic again, you're now actually using your brain pretty well. Now is the time to question, okay, well, what am I using to make that decision? What's the inputs? Because we all have a perspective which is based on our narratives and beliefs and the data that we're biased to. And it's not until you start shifting perspectives and start seeing it from different areas, which, by the way, you still can't do when you're stressed, hence why you need to do that first pause. In the second pause, it's now about, okay, well, what data am I using and what should I be questioning? Once you actually get those two pauses right, and they can be done in a matter of minutes, this isn't like, oh, I need to take a day off to do this. This can be done really quickly. Then the move becomes obvious. And you can apply whatever management techniques, whatever productivity techniques or hacks you want at that point, but you've got to get the first two bits right. For me, that's kind of the framework I run with. And it's, as I said, it's once you establish it as a routine, you don't necessarily need it every day, but once you have it as a routine, it's not a case of I'm stressed and I can't access my cognitive side of my brain. It's oh no, I have this 5-minute walk planned at 10 a.m. And you're like, oh, okay, actually I did need it today. I often talk of it like a defragmentation. I don't know if you remember in the computer, like decades ago, you'd press like defragment the disk and you'd have all these like little bars that would be all over the screen and then come together. That seems to be, actually, I talk about this 5-minute walk is now the most productive time of my day, where all of these different thoughts and different things and different, we're pulled in so many directions in the modern world. And you settle down to, okay, that's important and that isn't. That can be done tomorrow. That needs to be addressed now. And that's how I address it. Or that's why I'm not getting it, because I'm seeing it only from my perspective, not theirs. So.
Yeah. No, I love it. I love it.
And we are living in this kind of era of stronger and stronger fragmentation. So the whole world gets more and more fractalized and fragmented like every day. And to find those parts of the Mandelbrot or fractal that are the right ones for you can stress people out quite much already.
If they don't know, again, come back to the intrinsic, extrinsic. If you're making your decision on, if you can't say if you aren't aware of what your intrinsic motivators are.
I think a lot of people aren't aware of how fragmented and fractalized their world already is. And they are not aware of that they should make decisions and think of it because it's
Absolutely.
such a slow burn. It is such a slow, or it was, like you described in the beginning, it was such a slow change and such a slow process that a lot of people aren't aware of, that there has been a change. And it's funny because yesterday there are so many pieces of the puzzle falling together. I was in some kind of outdoor museum yesterday, where several people were living for a week, like in the Stone Age, and I talked to one guy who he and his wife, he made everything themselves. The huts and the leather clothes and their flintstone tools, over the course of years. They made everything themselves. And he said that in the region here in Bielefeld, at the Teutoburger Wald we live in, the people were like, they weren't hunter-gatherers, they were more like gatherer and hunters. Because gathering stuff was much easier. Yeah. He said, we made an experiment here, and with a group of 8 to 10 people, you would have needed like 2 weeks of consistent gathering hazelnuts, and then you would have enough hazelnuts to go through the winter just on the hazelnuts, and everything else would be on top. And he said the people would travel every few weeks or months. They would change their location for like 1 day march through the forest, and like start over there until they move to the next place or the next base camp for several weeks or several months. And it's he meant that in those times, like as he described it, I mean, he was living, or he tries to live like the people back then. He says, we have like 2 hours of work in a day with gathering or building stuff or so, and the rest of the time it's like free time. It's playtime, or it's like art time, or it's like doing something artsy or craftsmanship or so. But it's not like that you say, okay, I have my to-do list here, and I have to make this flintstones, and I have to catch this much fish. You go to the river and you look how much is in the net. And if there's enough, then okay. And if there's not enough, you have to get somewhere else some food. But most of the time, in springtime, you have more than enough after an hour of work or so to eat. And it totally blew my mind. I talked to him like half an hour or so, or 40 minutes, and it was so interesting, and to get in this mind and to get in this kind of, okay, that's how people might have lived 7, 8, 9,000 years ago, right in this area here. And he also said that people from the south came up, and those then started with the agriculture. And the people that were living here, they almost lived parallel to each other without influencing them that much. You had the people that were cultivating fields, and you still had the people who were living as gatherer and hunters for 2,000 years. Yeah. Until then, the agriculture people took over, and that was so fascinating. I was thinking like, okay. I asked him, what do you think? How much stress would those people have here? He said, not really. I mean, here weren't any saber-toothed tigers or so. Of course, there could have been a bear, or there could have been a boar or something like that. But he said, I don't think that the people were stressed out that much.
And I think that's really interesting. I would say that we don't need to go backwards to find that state. That state is always with us.
Yeah.
But it does demonstrate kind of when you reduce down the overload and the complexity, then what happens? And, humans then flourish.
Yeah.
Right.
And, kind of so this is one, again, one of the things that people have to get their heads around is that you don't have to necessarily drop out to find that environment. So if I'm being particularly mean to an audience when I'm public speaking, I ask them lots of questions. And one of the questions I say is just put your hand up when I say the place you have your best thinking. And I always start with the office because it's hilarious. Nobody puts their hand up unless they're sat next to their boss. Then they put their hand up. But nobody puts their hand up. And then you kind of get to, I have my best thinking when I'm in the shower or when I'm out walking or when I'm doing yoga or running or gardening, whatever it might be for somebody. And I say it's nothing to do with the environment you're in. It's just the state your brain's in. And it's at those moments, this is where we've got to get far better at dealing with technology, because there's no doubt that there's a lot of good that's happened since the Stone Age. We could take any measurement of life expectancy, medicine, poverty, all of these different things. There's been massive inroads done on those, but there is something we've missed as well. And I think that is the management of our state and our stress.
Go ahead and finish.
I was just going to say, so one of the things that kind of, as a baseline, just coming back to Alex's other question of what I do, actually, this is available to anybody. So, feel free to share it with your listeners. Is I have a what's called a tolerance of uncertainty quiz on my website. It's only like 10 multiple choice questions.
Oh, cool.
And it just gives you a very quick baseline reading of like, how much uncertainty can I or do I normally tolerate?
I love a good quiz.
Yeah, and it's a starting point, because you can even if you come out at 100%, like you can go higher. And talking about kind of all these things, as we get into, let's just say the world is complex and stressful now, add in a ton more disruption, as we started talking about right at the start of this podcast, and people are already at that set point where they can't cope with much more. And that's when you start seeing more division in society, because you can't see others' perspectives. And I'm going to bring this back to kind of neurodiversity in the workplace, because, neurodiverse populations have so much to give. And there is so much creativity and shifting perspectives. But workplaces have to become a less stressful place, because in a stressed work environment, other people, those people in that environment, they can't see others' perspectives. They can't tolerate different. And that's where the neurodiverse struggles, is because we naturally bring different views, different angles. And if it doesn't correspond with that stressed out person, they don't have the mental capacity at that point. Biologically, this is nothing against neurotypicals. All of us, even neurodiverse, when we're stressed, we can't see anything other than our rigid thought pattern. And so, we've got to get better. We've got to get better at that, because once we actually do, we can then really embrace everybody's thinking, and we can put that to work, and we can all kind of collaborate and join together in taking the human race forward.
Exactly. No, I totally agree with you. And it's the thing of it's we're in this era where, I want to say the demands on our bandwidth and our capacity. So it's another way of saying what you're talking about. And I kind of describe it as we have this maxed out bandwidth, and what the demands on our bandwidth are so far past what humans are capable of dealing with. And it's like, how do you dial it back? How do you slow it down? And it's that somebody described it as it's never going to be slower ever again than right now. Whoop. It's never going to be slower ever again than right now. So it's exponential. And it's like, what the hell do we do with that as humans? The fact that it's getting exponentially faster, and that we've been so maxed out with the bandwidth. Humans aren't created to deal with this kind of nonstop, relentless demand on our attention. And so I want to go back to the thing of like, where do you do your best thinking? And it's interesting because I do these retreats, and one of the most difficult things is putting languaging around the announcements to catch people's interest to coming to them. But it's like so I'm going to use this now because I was like, yes, that's a new way of describing it, because I'm always experimenting. And it's like, imagine, I can start off by saying, imagine, do that thing, where do you do your best thinking? And people say, in the shower, taking a walk. I say, now imagine a week of that. And this is what I do on the retreats. And we don't, I always also put filters on it and saying, if you need an itinerary, this is probably not the retreat for you. If you need, to have to be busy, this is probably not the retreat for you. So people are already kind of, the people who really need it and recognize it, they're the ones that join. But I really like that thing, where do you do your best thinking? And I'm going to experiment with this for the next retreat.
Yeah, please do.
Framing it in the, okay, yeah, what would you do if somebody were saying, I can give you a week of that? What would that be of value?
Yeah, let me know what your audience says.
Okay.
When you try it, because every time I've presented that in front of an audience at a conference or something, I get consistently the same results.
Right.
So it'd be fascinating.
Right. Because I asked the things, but not in the order that you said that you do them. I was just like, I recognize it immediately. It's like, okay, that's an interesting thing of putting people in that, or giving them the perspective, and then say, okay, well, what would that look like to you? And how do you, this guy, Stephen Kotler, who wrote The Art of Impossible, and it's about flow states. So I studied this a lot. And how can you enact a flow state kind of on command? But again, it takes a fairly high level of self-awareness to do that. And you're in a chemical thing of curiosity and a little bit of stress, but it's not like normal stress. It's a different kind of stress. And so there has to be enough of it, it's like being a skier. And it's like we were describing the second session when you went, there's enough things. So you did the one run and you're like, okay, I'm familiar with that. Then it's like, whew, it's out of the way, but there's still enough stress on it, but then you're in the zone.
Absolutely.
And so he talks about and so I help people map out their flow states. And
nice.
But it takes the thing of like where you're the stressors of, where's your baseline, where's your, the body awareness, the emotion awareness, exactly what you were talking about. Yeah. And so it's the thing of, I love that. So I'm going to pair that with the where do you do your best thinking? Yeah. Oh, that's very exciting.
And what do you do with it? I mean, I try to help people. This shower thing is always a good tool or a good example to say, okay, most people have good ideas or come out of the shower with some good ideas. And I don't know how often I gifted away like these waterproof notepads that you can take with you under the shower, or explain to people when they say, yeah, but I can't write something down in the shower. Say, you have an Apple Watch? It's waterproof. Take it under the shower and just dictate whatever comes to your mind. And then I always tell them that you could use showering as a tool and say, I don't go showering at 8 o'clock in the morning. I go at 12:35 when I need a boost in creativity, or when I have you can go showering 3 times a day if you want to, and just use it as a tool and say, okay, I go under the shower and I take this specific question or this specific task with me and keep it in the back of my mind and just shower for 10 minutes and see what I can come up with.
Right. Okay. Now I have to tease you about this. I have to jump in and tease you about this. Number one, you're like, yeah. And I tell these people, you have an Apple Watch. Not everybody has one of those. And then it's like, you can jump in the shower and take it 3 times a day for 10 minutes. Not in my household. Number one, my wife is like, she's got the timer going, right? And she's But in countries where there's a drought, you're not doing that. So it's like I would say your white Westernism is showing. And
Yeah, okay.
just have to put that on the table. Just have to put that on the table. But but showering for me, oh hell yeah, that's like the optimal idea factory. Yeah.
What I want to do here is
Sure.
I want to encourage you to think about that brain state you're in when you're in the shower. You don't actually need
Yes.
to be in the shower.
Yeah.
This is the point. This is almost like,
I begged it different. No, but I know what you mean. I know what you mean.
It almost can become an addictive behavior.
Yeah.
In that you go, oh, I can't get through this. I need to go have a shower.
Right.
Whereas actually, if we can just kind of really be introspective and build awareness, then we can transport that environment that we believe we're in when in the shower to anywhere we are.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of the next step on is absolutely, people can use these tools temporarily, but they've got to progress.
But you have to know what it feels like.
Yeah.
And this is what Stephen Kotler is talking about, is like, and what I help people map it out. Because if you're not aware of it, like exactly what you said, it starts to be kind of a crutch. And they start to feel almost like what's the word I'm thinking of? It's magical. Like there's something superstitious. It's almost superstitious. And it's like, no, you can do it anywhere. Like writer's block type of a thing.
We used to get told this in kind of like psychology things during when I was a young athlete, that kind of just because you win a race wearing a certain pair of socks, don't keep wearing a certain pair of socks. It's not the socks.
Right.
But it's so easy to fall into. You're like, oh well, what was it today? I performed so well. It must be the socks. I've never worn these ones before.
Right.
That can turn very bad for all your teammates if you wear the same pair of socks every day. Very quickly. But it's kind of what we like to do as humans is always externalize, always go, oh, I need that to feel this. And actually it's the process of, no, I have everything I need already.
Exactly.
It's fascinating though. The human mind is the most fascinating place there is. Isn't
it? Yeah. I knew this was going to be great conversations with you. And as predicted, I told Alex, I said, oh, it's going to be lucky if you're going to get a word in edgewise.
But no, thank you so much for the conversation. It's been wonderful.
Super. I kind of feel like we're going to need a part 2 in here at some point.
Yeah, that would be good.
I want to hear more about the Pathfinder mindset, because that sounds so intriguing. Yeah.
So I mean, really, this came from a piece of research that I was studying resiliency and kind of decision making under conditions of uncertainty. Unsurprising, really, as my nickname is the uncertainty scientist. But really, where the Pathfinder mindset came in was just kind of what are the core pillars that people have that successfully navigate change. And I just took the name because the Pathfinder just kind of harkens back to that long forgotten time where there were lands we didn't know what was ahead, and they literally the ones that went ahead and said, yes, this direction, and it's safe. We've mapped it out. We've found the path, the Pathfinder. And when you look at that, I mean, really, that kind of it's how I've just described the pause move framework. The pause move framework is the physical application of the Pathfinder mindset. So the Pathfinder mindset really revolves around inner awareness and introspection, and then emotional regulation, and then really what I call liminal thinking or big picture thinking. So every state we're ever in, if we can't see that it's an in-between state, something's rising and something's falling, if we can't step back and see that there's more things moving than the one thing we're concentrating on, we don't have enough data to make a decision. And society has kind of pushed us into this world where we are hyper specialists. Every single day since you leave primary school, at age whatever, 6 or 7, you're funneled, you're encouraged to go, okay, we'll specialize in this, dive deeper, and we become extremely good at a fraction of the world. I actually think to see change and the magnitude of change today, you need to become a generalist. And that's kind of one of the big concepts of this Pathfinder mindset. That's pause two. Pause two is step back and just go, what am I missing? What don't I know? What else do I need to add into my decision making? So yeah, that's the kind of the Pathfinder mindset is almost the pause move framework, but just from the theory level.
Cool.
No, I like it. I like it. It also, listening to you also makes me realize I need an intern. I always come back to this. I need an intern. Go through all my notes and synthesize things, because you have kind of a, I don't want to say a structure, but you have these things chunked down, and I know that I repeat a number of things, and it's like I would love to come up with a system sort of like that, what you have with the pause, move, and because I have a number of them. How did you come up with this, and or how did you synthesize what you had been learning? I'm totally doing this. This is not therapy, but you said this is like you're learning something of like, how did you get it to that point? Do you understand my question?
Yeah, it was just 10 minutes in the shower. No, I'm joking. No, it was basically just kind of, again, I think that process of the second pause, of stepping back, and I was stepping back from my own work, going, what are the bigger things I'm trying to say here? Not the detail, but what is it? What is it that on a really big picture level I'm trying to communicate? And it suddenly hit me that there's actually two micro pauses. These kind of first pause is check inside, second pause is check outside, then move. And then it was just that kind of, oh my word, pause, move. And I think Einstein's kind of quote on what creativity is, it's combinational play, that things just come together. That's what breakthroughs are. And when you're in a far more kind of less stress state and joy state, those things happen more frequently.
Definitely.
And it was just time spent with it. I can't say there's any magic formula to finding them, apart from joy is a magic formula. The state of joy brings incredible things.
Totally.
And so for me, it was actually following the pause, move framework personally without knowing its name. And over time, it was like, oh yeah, so there are two pauses, and in the first one you do this, and the second one you do that, and then you're good to move. That suddenly then became round to, well, it's called pause, move. So hopefully, I know I haven't really given you an answer.
Well, no. It's interesting to hear. I like hearing how you did it, and it makes sense, because there's a lot of stuff that I'm doing and have been doing, but I'm having a hard time describing to people what it is that I do, because it's just, I don't know any different. What I notice is that what other people either aren't doing it or struggling with doing the things that I do. And I'm happy that you mentioned the word joy, because this is one of the things I wanted to ask you. And just to let you know, I'm going to have to jump kind of at 2:30. I really hate it. I have to go.
I'm going to have to as well. So don't worry.
It's going to be like a hard cliff drop off. So I'd like to end on this, but this is one of the things, is I could tell by your answer and how your face lit up that you have an easy access to joy, as do I.
Yeah.
And it's one of the things that when I'm talking to people, I can tell whether they do or do not, judging by how their face looks. And there's a lot of times where when I'm speaking about it, people either don't believe me, they'll think I'm lying, and I'm guessing you've had, come across that as well. But it's like speaking about joy is a lot of times can seem dangerous almost. And it seems very woo-woo to people. And it's like and I'm able to do it now because of the pandemic.
Yep.
But before the pandemic, it was hard to speak about it. But this is a thing, the joy of peeling everything back, and it's such a primal as well as fear. because you see animals and you know that they're experiencing joy.
Yep.
If you see dogs or cats laying in the sunspot and they're just full of joy. And so it's like, how often, I ask people this, how often do you feel joy? And I always have to check my response because there's a kind of no filter on me facially. And if they say, God, I never do. What are you talking about? And my first reaction is, aw, but I don't want to do that in front of somebody. You do know what I mean? So it's like, how long have you, I know we only got 4 minutes. How long have you always been connected to joy?
I think, I think I have a natural disposition too. And I think that comes from my mum. She was a lady who was definitely wired for joy and taught me that. And so the way I typically kind of describe this with people is I contrast joy and happiness. Most time in the culture, people think they're the same thing and they're not. Speaking from a psychological or a neurological basis, they're very different. Joy is an internal state. Happiness is something fleeting and external. And I think when you bring that up in terms of science, that joy is a scientific term. It's not some woo-woo concept. It's a scientific term, and joy is connectedness. It's being at one with yourself. It's understanding your own needs. It's being completely content in the moment and not needing anything more than you have. Then people start to go, okay, I kind of get that a little bit more. But no, for me, it has been a process I've worked on. Coming back to the idea of plasticity and what we practice, we make permanent. I have done a lot of work on controlling stress, controlling anxiety. As I said right at the start, I'm a naturally anxious person. And over time, you strengthen those connections for joy, and that's your default state. And when times hit you sideways, which they always will in life, you know how to come back to default. And that's kind of the point of all my coaching and group work, is to allow people to rewire to a default state of joy.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
We're doing the same work. We are doing the same work, my friend.
Cool.
It's so much fun.
No, thank you so much for such a great conversation. Yes, sorry, I've got to jump off. Otherwise, I could keep going.
we have this tradition tradition of downhill parking. So we park our car like downhill, that we can jump in next time and just take the foot off the brake and start the next journey. So we would be happy to do a second.
Do a part two.
Yeah. Let's do a part two. Let's wait a couple of months. Give me.
Yeah. Catch you in the fall. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll send you a link to that quiz and things. If you want to put it in the show notes and things.
Yes.
Okay. And I'm definitely looking up the gin. I'm looking up your Foragers Gin. I'm like, oh. Yeah.
Super.
My new best friend, Chris Marshall, brews gin.
No, brilliant to speak to you. And
cool.
Yeah, I look forward to part two, where we'll dive into joy more. Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Have a great week.
Take care.
Bye. Thank you, Chris.
Cool.
Bye-bye.
Bye.